Hi, my name is Ian Reynolds. I'm a partner at Zibtek, and this is a quick overview of our design philosophy. Design is an increasingly important component of building a quality web application. You can't really circumnavigate the needs for design in an increasingly online world, and users, that is, people who are increasingly purchasing their products, their software solutions, and anything really online with the advent of e-commerce, design quality disproportionately affects a user's perception of what it is that they could be buying or using. So it's really important. And part of our engineering process is to start with a really strong design process to make sure that we get it right for the users. If the engineers have a really clear perspective of what it is that they're building and it's intuitive and something that they can understand, they're going to architect a much better product. Importantly, design also affects the usability of an asset. The best case study that we love to show is the Zibtek website. Historically, we've sold our work and our services really only through word of mouth and through traditional sort of sales methods. However, in 2018, we redesigned our website and we started seeing conversions based on the quality of the design that people were seeing. They were responding differently to the content that we're putting out. And by and large, we didn't really change much of the text. We really changed mostly design elements to better indicate, hey, you should go here to get more information for this topic, and C, also represent ourselves in a much more clear way to the marketplace. Additionally, study after study really show that people decide if they like something within tenths of a second after seeing it. People prefer asymmetrical things, that is, things that are uniform, right? So the right side matches the left side, not things that are sort of obscurely designed. Picasso can be a bit of an acquired taste for most to understand what he's doing with the sort of cubism and these things. And the same is true in markets generally. People prefer homogeneity. They want things to be the same. You can go to McDonald's anywhere, you can get your hash browns and quarter pounder with cheese, right? Design carries over in most applications, right? People expect certain applications to function like other applications that are similar that they've used before. There are really simple concepts in design that are carried throughout web applications. The one that we like to talk about here is the golden ratio. So the golden ratio is something that is a sort of mathematical concept that is seen very commonly both in art, but then also in nature. It's a sort of simple arithmetic number, simple equation, and helps sort of support that asymmetry, right? Smaller objects move and sort of define what larger objects should be in proportion to themselves. And it's something that we see time and time again, and increasingly as web developers and engineers and software engineers are getting more sophisticated, they're making use of design elements which can be found in nature to really sort of improve and provide that asymmetry. Spacing is another important component of that plays in an asymmetry piece, but really, text and objects are the core of an application. You want to make it as user-friendly as possible, as easy for the user to navigate. Some of this plays into user experience, where you click buttons, how that button interacts, where that button guides you, can really be propped up and supported by the design of the application. Spacing is very, very important. And you always want to prioritize clarity where appropriate, use things like the golden ratio. And then negative space is also a mechanism for conveying, where an object is that should be the attention of the user. You really want them to focus on what matters, and you want them to improve the readability of the application. So Apple, if you go to their website, they make an extensive use of negative space because they really just want you to focus on their products. They're a really strong consumer brand. There are a couple hard and fast rules. This is in some cases where design blends with UX a little bit. Really you don't want to design anything that blocks the user action for the sake of any design element. And you always want to allow the user to accelerate an action, right? So design shouldn't impede user experience. And the same is true with anything that sort of animates. You truly kind of want that to be as quickly as possible, usually under 0.25 seconds. And then you, again, never want to block a user for the sake of an animation. Colors, and this, colors are equally important in the design process. We look at sort of Apple's guidelines as a really great example of how to, build an application, say for iOS. So we have Apple guidelines here. You really want to be kind of monochromatic. You don't want to go crazy with the color because your users are learning what you are conveying to them about what the application can do, where they should be guided for the use of buttons. And primary colors are generally easier for people to understand. And there's some homogeneity between most applications on the web and offline. And so mirroring those patterns, mirroring those design elements is a common way to really make sure that you're just kind of making things as simple as possible for your user, right? Newspapers are written at a third grade reading level. Applications should also be designed at a sort of third grade reading level, so to speak. Color really should be used judiciously. You don't want to use color that makes it hard for a person to perceive content. So something that is, 2 shades of gray right next to each other, you want to have a higher degree of contrast so that the user understands, like, oh, this is an object and this is a button and this is just the background, right? And so, nearby colored objects that are translucent is also something that we typically want to try to avoid and be careful of. So for, you want to use complementary colors in the application. You want to limit the color palette that really kind of matches with your logo. You want to avoid using the same color for interactive and non-interactive elements, and then consider, again, that translucency element. So this is an example of 2 versions of a screen. So this is a very complex screen. This is how to create a drip sequence in Encore CRM. This is an early version of the designs. And again, remember, a simple design that the engineers can understand is going to ultimately help them build a better product. But this design didn't actually make use of the sort of numerical spacing that we sort of talked about in most places, and didn't sort of consider some of these elements of having colors that were sort of near to each other, correct? And it also didn't make use of that sort of negative space component. And then here it is after it's been reviewed by the designer. It's much simpler. Some elements have stayed the same, but it's much more easy for the user to read and much more easy for the user to understand what each element does, and where there is color, that color supports action or supports that this is what an object is for. And so the design between here and here can add pretty significant clarity. And it's something that we take into the process that we're doing with everything that we do at Zibtek, and really can't be overstated in terms of importance. Again, design should be considered separate from user experience. User experience is how I interact with something, but it can't be fully separated from design, in that design can inform user experience. For example, in this application, green indicates action, indicates color, indicates that something is on or you're saving it. Whereas, with different types of device types, mobile, for example, you're swiping on the screen. All of these interactions need to sort of be considered in tandem with what are the objectives of design, what are you trying to convey with the brand, and then take those components into testing, right? And sometimes you can design things that may be intuitive to the designer, but are absolutely not intuitive for the end user. And we have had the opportunity to sort of take this design praxis and apply this to a number of major firms. And we have 255 professionals globally, and these are the type of experiences we train them on. We want them to understand that design is an integral part of what it is that they're building. We deploy across about 75 different common technologies, and in every sense of the word, while we deploy across a lot of engineering technologies, design is really kind of the capstone that helps make all these things understandable and intuitive when paired with UX. So that concludes our talk for today, but if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out, hello@zibtek.com, or reach us at our main line. We'd love to hear about your engineering project and what you're looking to build. Talk to you soon.